I spent 30 days testing the Narwhal Freo Pro, cleaning 2 times a day in a messy house with dogs, kids, and 10 years of robot vacuum experience under my belt. Could this budget-friendly robot vacuum with 8,500 pascals of suction and a clever detangling brush handle my German Shepherd's hair in a week's worth of chaos? I'm not here to nitpick sand grains. I'll tell you if it keeps our filthy house livable. And spoiler, it's got some surprising tricks up its sleeve, like compressing debris in its bin, which really surprised me, to mopping that tackled paw prints and dust. So stick around to see if it's worth your money. The Narwhal Freo Pro is a budget option in the Narwhal lineup, but that does not mean it cuts corners on key features. And the main reason that I partnered with Narwhal for this video is the fact that the base does not have a vacuum in it to vacuum out the robot. The robot has its own bin and it has this compressive feature so that it can keep running for days and days without that bin getting overfilled. I'm not testing lab stats here. I care if it handles my messy house with dogs and kids. And as I just said, 8,500 pascals of suction, what does that mean to you in the real world? And for me, on my hard floors as well as my rugs, that means that it picks up all the dog hair and dust effectively. Which on my hard floors, it's hard to tell, but by looking at the bin and looking at the carpets, you can tell that this thing is doing a great job picking up all of that hair and dust. Now let's get into the detangling brush, which is something some other competitors are also releasing on the market. And what Narwhal has done here essentially is a cantilevered brush that as hair wraps around it, it's moving it to the end where it is sucking in the debris. But what separates Narwhal from these other brands is the side brushes. The side brushes have 2 brushes instead of the traditional 3 that you would typically see, and they hinge. So if hair gets wrapped around it, they can hinge closed and the hair will slip off and be pulled into that main brush. I tested this with some ribbon so that you could see it very well. Also, I was inspired by this by the hookup, so thank you. And I laid it down on the floor and I just set the robot to go. It took a little bit of effort on some of the really long pieces because it would wrap around the brush, but eventually it would work itself all the way into the bin, and it did a great job not getting the side brushes tangled and not getting that main brush tangled and moving all of the ribbon into the dustbin. I was very impressed with that. Now, when getting to the bin, you actually have 2 options, and I don't think I've ever seen this before on any robot vacuum. It has a standard clear bin. It is rather large, and it's reusable. You can open it up and dump it out. But they also have a disposable option. And I don't think I've ever seen that before, but you might be thinking, okay, Richard, what, you're gonna vacuum one time and just throw this away? No, so I teased in the intro about this compression feature, which I was very skeptical of. Just to recap, most of the robot vacuums that I've looked at nowadays have a base that vacuums them out. This Narwhal does have a base, which we're gonna get into, but it does not vacuum itself out. At the end of a run, it will vacuum very aggressively and compress that debris in the bin. I let this thing run for a week in this main room of my house, which gets all the traffic, all the dog hair, everything. And typically most robot vacuums would get 1 run in, if that, and their little bin would be full and they'd go back to the base, vacuum themselves out, and they would be fine. To my astonishment, after running it in here for a week, I opened the bin, the debris had moved over to one side, it was nice and compressed, and the filter wasn't clogged. One thing that I'm gonna point out here is that you might watch other channels, something like Vacuum Wars, which I love. I'm a huge fan of, and you should go watch their video on this product as well if they make one. But if you have a vacuum and you say, okay, I measured out all this sand, I ran it over it and all that, so this vacuum picks up 99.7 and this vacuum picks up 99.8. Those are all great tests, and I think that's great, like in the moment showcasing how that vacuum can pick up. What I'm interested in is, okay, it can do that one time, so one vacuum might be a little bit better than the other, but what about for weeks or months on end when this thing is running in your house? That's why I think the bin compression feature is so interesting, because over the course of a week, the bin didn't fill somehow, and also the filter didn't clog. A lot of other robot vacuums, after just a few days in my house, I have so much sand and dust that gets tracked in. That stuff goes right to the filter and I can shake them out and tons of debris falls out. And so their suction is going way down as the days continue in a week. So I found that so interesting about this Narwhal is that after a week of use running multiple times a day, the vacuum wasn't clogged. I was able to empty it out, close it back up, put it in the vacuum, and set it to keep going, no problem. Narwhal says that you could get up to 7 weeks. Now, if you didn't have a dog, I'm sure you could easily achieve 7 weeks. For me, about a week and that bin would start to get full, which is still very impressive. And you might be thinking, okay, but what about a base? Why not just use a base? So one is gonna be cost, because that's an additional vacuum and a bag and all that stuff. The other thing is that over Christmas, for me, the mixture of dog hair and pine needles from my Christmas tree proved to be a killer for the robot vacuums that I was using. The base would clog, and it would take me a few days to realize this, and the vacuum would be running every day, but the bin would just be totally full and it wouldn't be getting anything up off the floor. And the disposable option, especially if you're getting multiple weeks of runtime, if you have severe allergies or something like that, or whatever you're picking up off your floor, if you don't want to be touching that, then you can just take that bag out after a few weeks of cleaning, throw it away, and put another one in. Now, let's talk about noise. It is very quiet when it actually comes to the vacuum itself. It has 4 suction levels that you can set in the app. And even on high, it's still a very quiet vacuum. I think that's the way that it's engineered because it doesn't have to vacuum itself out. So that stuff is kind of deep inside, nice and buried in there. So you're getting that soundproofing inside that robot vacuum. But you can also let the app decide the suction level depending on what you're going for. So you can manually do it, or you can have the app decide, hey, what should the suction level be? How often should I clean this area? And then how often to mop an area, which gets us right into the mopping. And this is right what you would expect from a vacuum that mops itself. It has its base, which I mentioned. It has a clean water tank and it has a dirty water tank. So it's gonna load the clean water, go mop, come back, wash its mop every so often. It's also gonna exchange that dirty water out. And then at the end of the run, it will dry the mop pads, and even some of that air is gonna make it into that disposable bag, if you're using that disposable bag, to make sure that it stays nice and dry so you don't get any type of mold growth or anything weird like that in the bin. Given that my home is mostly hard floors, I have a ton of area to mop, and I mostly let it run in the dirt sense mode so that it was making a decision on how often it would mop. When it goes back to the base station and it's cleaning those mops, it can tell how dirty the water is and say, hey, this water is very dirty, we need to go re-mop that area. So that was really interesting. Typically, I will just set the number of mopping times myself, but I wanted to test this tech, and so I went through a lot of water because my house is, according to Narwhal, it's very dirty, which it is given the traffic that is in here. But the biggest culprit in this house would be dogs outside tracking and paw prints, and it pretty much keeps all paw prints off the floor. We have a project ongoing and we have sheetrock dust, and that stuff, I don't know if you've dealt with it before, it just sticks and does not come up. Even with just a vacuum, you pretty much have to mop to get it up, and the Narwhal went over it one time and got that dust up no problem. And even if you have carpets or rugs, it's gonna lift those mop pads up so it doesn't drag any wet mop pads over them. So you can have it just vacuum, you can have it vacuum and mop, you could have it just mop, or really any combination of things that you could dream up it could do, or you can have it decide for itself in the app. And that setting is called Freo Mind. So when you have that ticked on in the app, then the robot itself will adjust the cleaning strategy. And that leads me right into the app. When you get this thing started up for the first time, you're gonna do a quick mapping run, which is super handy. It took about 15 minutes and generates a nice clean app. You can edit it, you can merge rooms, divide rooms, whatever you need to do, you can do that in the app. It's clearly laid out and straightforward. It's one of the more user-friendly apps that I've found. If you're not using Freo Mind, then you've got the 4 levels of suction, you've got 3 levels of mopping, or you can do the Freo Mind and it can decide for itself. You can also have it do a meticulous clean or a faster clean, and you can set up schedules. And the last thing we're gonna touch on is the obstacle avoidance. So this particular model is gonna be using a LiDAR on top, so 360-degree LiDAR. On the front, it's 3D structured light, and it can detect down to 1 centimeter. So if you have a bunch of kids stuff, especially that is smaller than that, you're gonna wanna pick that up before the run. And it also has a lateral sensor as well. But generally speaking, for this model before the run, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have that really small stuff picked up so that this robot can have success in its cleaning and mopping runs. So if you're in the market for a robot vacuum and you don't want to be spending a couple $1,000, $1,500, $1,000 for this insane model, I think this is a great compromise for price versus functionality. It has strong function, the innovative features, those side brushes are really interesting, how it doesn't get that long hair caught on there. Same with the main brush. And the bin and compressing the debris down is also very interesting. It's great at mopping and it has a solid app. So I hope this video was helpful for you if you're in the market for a robot vacuum, if you're looking to upgrade, or if you're just getting in for the first time. Thank you so much for stopping by Break It Yourself to watch this video. I know you have zillions of videos that you could be watching and you chose to watch this one. Don't forget to thumbs me up, and we will see you next time.